What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with a comic book dry cleaning video for Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today we are continuing our video series on this well-loved copy of Hulk 180, the first appearance of Wolverine that belongs to friend of the channel Tony Franklin, that he asked us to evaluate for conservation. We use this comic as a case study of when you should do a full conservation and when it makes more sense to do a traditional dry clean and press. This book should require no introduction, being the first appearance of Wolverine, who appears in the last panel. While not as coveted as Hulk 181, which includes an epic battle between the Hulk, Wolverine, and Wendigo, and has Wolverine's first cover appearance, the value of this once affordable book really took off during the pandemic, and it's become quite a valuable book in its own right. While this is obviously a comic book with numerous flaws, to put it in perspective, a slabbed 3.0 Universal has a fair market value of $450. A 3.5 has a fair market value of $500. A 4.0 has a fair market value of $550. A 4.5 has a fair market value of $625, and a 5.0 has a fair market value of $700, even in today's down market. In episode 1, we did an assessment of this comic and its potential with either a traditional dry clean and press or a more extensive full conservation. We determined that although it has some water stains and general wear and creasing, overall, it's a solid book that is not in danger of deteriorating and can safely be read and enjoyed as a comic book. As part of that assessment, we provided a framework for evaluating the risks of conservation work and determining the best course of action for a given comic book to maximize equity in your collection. After applying this rigorous approach to our assessment, we decided the best course of action for this comic book was a traditional dry clean and press. I created a playlist for this project, so if you want to watch episode 1 before watching this one, click on the link to check it out. Alright, let's get started dry cleaning this comic book. Make sure you have clean and dry hands before you play with your friends' comic books. I'm using my Pentel Click Eraser. This is my weapon of choice. This is what I do 98% of all my dry cleaning with this tool. I prefer it to the other ones on the market. It's a PVC white eraser like you are probably familiar with. It has a diameter similar to a pencil, and I often cut the end of it at an angle. Not always, it just depends on what I'm working on, where the soiling is and how tight the work is. But right now I'm working with about a 45-degree angle on the eraser. I'm going to start working on the gutter on the back cover. And those of you that are regular viewers of the channel know you're going to spend 80 to 90% of your time dry cleaning comics on the back cover, because the front cover has a lot of ink, not as many white areas typically, and the back cover has a lot of white and has these broad gutters, sometimes more broad than others. So you have the same ads that you're going to view over and over again. And that's just how it is. It is tedious. It takes a while. You have to be very patient, because if you rush this work, you will damage a comic book. So I'm just going to start here. I'm going to work my way around counterclockwise, occasionally brushing the eraser crumbs out of the way. This is a pretty soiled book, but it's also typical of a well-loved book from this era. They often have really quite dirty back covers. So it's not something we haven't seen many times before, and we don't know how to deal with. Sometimes I use the drafting brush to remove the eraser crumbs. Sometimes I'm in the habit of just using my hands. I don't think it matters that much. Probably best practice is the drafting brush because you probably have some oils in your hands that you transfer. But at the same time, I wash my hands essentially immediately before doing any of this work. And sometimes, especially in the winter, your hands are so dry, I'm sure there's some measurable oils there, but not much. Certainly not enough to transfer to the book and make any sort of a difference. So don't feel bad if you don't have a drafting brush to brush away your eraser crumbs. When you're working on a book this dirty, your eraser will get a little grimy and it'll start to have some dark buildup on it. I don't know if you noticed, but as I pulled my eraser away from the book, I did a quick rub on the hobby mat, and that's to get some of that grime off of the eraser. You can do that in a number of different ways, and some books don't require it, but when you have a really dirty book, you will have to clean your eraser from time to time. Some people like to use an Absorine sponge. And by the way, people, it's Absorine. There's no second B. I hear a lot of people saying absorbine. That's not the correct way to say the word. I mean, there is no other B in it, so it's Absorine. They make a putty on a sponge. At any rate, some people like to use an Absorine sponge to clean their eraser. The hobby mat works quite well, and it's right there. It has a little bit of not really an abrasive surface because it's soft, but it has a surface with some texture, and so that texture allows you to clean your eraser quite effectively. You can also use, here's my Mono Zero eraser. I need to get into a tight spot here. This is a 2.3 millimeter eraser. I go over all of the tools that I use in a recent video, and I'll put a link in it. There's also links in the description to the specific tools I use. They're Amazon affiliate links. If you're going to buy any dry cleaning tools or materials, I appreciate using them. Helps out the channel. As I was saying, you can use paper. You can use your hobby mat. Sometimes I use my fingers or my fingernail. But you will notice here, and I'll probably call it out a few times, on a book this dirty, you're going to have to clean your eraser from time to time because it just gets dark and you get a little buildup of grime on it. So I'm constantly scanning back and forth. As you know, I'm looking at this book through 10x magnification with a really strong LED lighting. I have a ring light that's clamped to my desk in my work studio, and I think this is really important. CGC is using magnification and really good lighting when they grade your book. If you're not using the same similar lighting and magnification when you're doing your cleaning, you're not prepping your book sufficiently to maximize the grade, in my opinion, no matter how good your eyesight is. This book is going to CGC. That's where Tony's asked us to sub it on his behalf after we finish work on it. So usually prep all books as if they were going to CGC anyway, but in this particular case it is specifically going to CGC. When we get to the edge, I want to make sure we erase in one direction toward the edge, then lift, go back onto the book and erase toward the edge again. So you'll notice my stroke there at the edge is just a little different than it is in the center of the gutter in the middle of the page. Pretty gentle movement here with this particular paper, with this particular book, with this particular era. You can apply a little bit more pressure than you would with, say, a Silver Age book or a book that's has more brittle page. This paper quality is actually quite high in this book. It's a nice, supple book. So I am applying a little bit more pressure than you've seen me use on, say, a Silver Age book. Still quite gentle, though. My rule of thumb is if you erase the soil in one pass, you're pushing too hard. You should be taking multiple light passes to do the work rather than one heavy pass with the eraser with respect to pressure. So with a book this dirty, I'll often go back over areas. I'll get one area white, and I'll notice now against that area, an area that I've already worked on looks a little grimy now again. So I'll go back and hit it again. So that method might look a little haphazard. Notice again at the edge, I'm going to go away from the center of the book, and I'm going to lift at the edge, bring it back into the paper, set it down, and then erase away from the book again. So that method may look a little haphazard, but I'm constantly scanning the entire surface of the book when I'm not erasing actively in an area, and I will find areas eventually because I end up going over that surface. Really, it's more than triple checked. I probably end up looking at the entire surface about 5 times. We started, of course, with a cotton round on this surface, and then we're using this Pentel click eraser. We see some tight areas, we'll move to the Mono Zero, or I do also have an intermediate size eraser that I occasionally use. There's me cleaning that eraser head so you can kind of see what I do. I'll just drag it on my hobby mat a few times, sometimes use my finger to get that grime off the eraser. And keep going. Here it looks like there might be some foreign bodies on the comic book. As we turn this gutter. So I'm going to inspect those. You can feel them with your eraser if you're observant as well. And you'll note I use the eraser 2 ways. It does have about a 45-degree angle cut on it. Sometimes I use it flat, essentially. I'll use the entire heel, if you will, of the eraser. Then when I need, that keeps it nice and sharp, by the way, because it wears it down, keeping it shaped like a chisel. And in a wide gutter like this, you can very safely do that on a book of this era. And then when I need to get into a tighter area, I'll twist it and I'll use just the point. Or it may not be a tighter area, it may be an area where I want to use less force, and I'll twist it. There we go, I'm cleaning the eraser, which I have to do regularly on a book this dirty. And we'll get the eraser crumbs out of the way. And I think I do have some foreign bodies here. So I'm going to get my little chisel and I'm going to remove them. This is actually an electronics tool, but it's essentially, and you see that was a body that didn't come off with erasing, but I was able to get this pick or tiny chisel to catch the edge of it and pop it off the paper. And once I noticed that, I noticed there are several other little foreign bodies, foreign substances on the surface of the book. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape all of them off. including one here in the, maybe one or two in the area of the yellow ink. Yeah, there's one right there too. And that was quite effective. But I find when I chisel, when you've had a foreign body adhered to the surface of the book for a while, it'll often leave behind a little stain, or there'll be a slight discoloration there. So I always return and erase the paper. If nothing else, it should give it a uniform sheen with the paper around it that got erased the first time when that foreign body was actually covering the paper up and not allowing my eraser to get it. Tiny little paper tag there. So we want to make sure that this corner, which just has a tiny dog ear on it as well, that the paper is nice and flat. Really dig this book. It's just a cool first appearance. I love actually that it's a cameo. It was just a great cliffhanger. Imagine reading that book and seeing the Wolverine for the first time. I mean, you would be sleepless until the next month when 181 came out. Then you'd be blown away by that incredible cover on Hulk 181, right? This is the Wolverine's original costume as well, his traditional maize and blue. Before he went to the gold and brown during the later Byrne and Claremont era. Here I'm cleaning that eraser again just with my fingers this time. You'll notice sometimes I just sort of dance it across my hobby mat as I pull it away from the work. I don't usually spend a lot of time doing it unless it's really required. Now it's time for finishing the back cover here. We're going to use a kneadable eraser, and I'm kneading it now to warm it up a little bit, make it soft and pliable, but also to knead any trash that's in the eraser off of the surface. And I'm just going to gently drag it. This is safe. I inspect often to make sure I'm not picking up too much ink, but this is safe to do on the areas that have ink as long as you're gentle. Don't do too many strokes. And it just brightens up these areas that are light colored, especially like this light blue. It's close to white, so it shows soiling quite well. You definitely want to get in there and clean that up. The yellow is a bit darker. I should say the main yellow of the back of the ad. And it does pick up quite a bit with a kneadable eraser. So I want to hit that very gently. But this blue is a little bit more color fast. It's a little bit safer. And that's it. That's the rear of the comic book cleaned. And next episode, we'll start working on this front cover. What an amazing book. I hope you enjoyed this dry cleaning tutorial featuring Tony's copy of Hulk 180 for submission to CGC. I think it's cleaning up quite nicely. Any guesses on where you think this might grade out when we're done? Let me know in the comments below. Next episode, we're going to dry clean the front of this book and press it and go over the dry clean and press final results. Then it will be off to CGC and the waiting game while we wait for this comic book to be graded. You won't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Until next time, take care of one another.